Say which we give it like
Nope.
5 more?
We're going to go. And then we can just have people come in.
Come in, and if you're registered, no, okay, you guys can sign up here on the list if you need it. Sorry. And show that you.
But I'll do the.
Everybody will get signed in and get started. So yeah, those are toys. People have not toys. Thank you. Feel free to sit wherever you like. I'm gonna go ahead and have you do it, and then go ahead and give welcome everybody. Thanks for coming, and I'm gonna let our wonderful presenter introduce himself, but just a little bit of quick housekeeping because we're running a little behind. We're having everyone check to see if they're registered and sign in. So if you haven't done so, please do so. And then in order to keep our services free, it's really important that we get the evaluations and surveys back in order to keep them free and in order to improve them and hear what you would like. And last, but almost last but not least, please turn off the cell phones as a courtesy. And if you need interpretation, there's instructions here for calling in.
I realize I have to turn off my cell phone.
Oh yeah, thank you. Come on in. And if you're interested in donating to keep our services free, there's boxes at the end and beginning of the auditorium. And welcome, thanks for coming. My name's Sarah. I work at Support for Families. I'm here to support our presenter. Thank you.
All right. Question, will I be getting the evaluations from?
Good question. I can let you know.
Okay.
I don't know. I believe you
Okay.
could
Great.
to get an update. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
If you like it, some people are taking it for credit. Some people just want to have it for their record training. Something available to you right now. Okay. Well, without further ado, just because we're a little bit behind, come on in.
All right, we're going to jump in. So my name is Ed, and I'm the founder of The Village Well, which is an organization that provides support, parenting support, healing, connection, community skills, particularly to families of color. And I'll say more about the genesis of The Village Well. It's a new organization. I founded it last year. And the title of this workshop is Staying Calm When Your Kids Are Not. So please raise your hand if you have mastered that skill. Yeah. Right? Because I think it is the hardest thing in parenting, right? For me, is staying grounded, staying connected, staying present, and not losing our stuff when our kids are flying off the handle, right? So I'm going to start off with a little story that goes all the way back to this morning at about 8:30. My husband and I have two kids, an 11-year-old and, a 12-year-old, they both just had birthdays, and a 6-year-old. And as many families, Saturdays are busy for us, taking our kids to different activities, figuring out what we're going to do. This Saturday, especially busy because I'm coming here. And so my husband's on double duty. And so we decided that he was going to take the baby, he's 6, the baby to karate. And I was going to come here, and our older son could stay home alone. Right? And so we get ready. I'm dressed up, kids in karate clothes, about to head out the door. And then my older son, who's still in his bathrobe, hasn't brushed his teeth, anything, turns to my husband and says, "Can you take me to Dylan's house?" And I see the surge rise up in Chris. And one of the things I know is that Chris is an amazing planner, right? And so he's the one who does the planning, holds the schedules, makes sure all the difficult pieces fit together. And so he just got thrown for a loop that he didn't expect and didn't like as he's trying to get out the door. And so he turns to my older son and goes, "Oh, why didn't you tell me earlier? I could have managed this," right? And I see him get hot around the ears. I see him start to sweat. And I step forward and I go, "Babe, you're angry at the ADD." I'm going to stop the story there. We'll come back to it later in the workshop. All right? How many of you can relate to this? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Right? And so, thinking about what our triggers are, right, is what we're going to do today. And we're going to look at how we can short circuit those triggers from happening, and then a little bit how we can respond in ways that are productive and supportive for our kids. Yeah. And so I'm curious, how many of you here are here as parents? Great. Anybody here as educator, social worker? Yeah, both. Anybody here is both? Great. For parents, how many of you have kids 0 to 5? Okay. How many of you have lower elementary school? So 6 to, great. Going up to 4th, 5th, 6th grade. Okay. Middle school, teenagers, adult kids. All right. Those are the worst. Yeah. Did I miss out any categories? Okay, great. And so, yeah, let's jump in. All right, so take a look at this picture. Think about what you see, what you interpret, what you feel in your body, and how you identify. Let's assume this is a daughter and the elbow of her mom, right? She looks about 7, 8 to me, right? So what's happening? What do you see? What do you interpret? She's protesting what? Social justice? Maybe she doesn't want to be there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
She's trying to throw a tantrum because she wants something. The mom says, "No, you cannot have."
Right. Target is hell, by the way.
Yes.
Right? Don't take your kids anywhere near the toy area of Target, right? What else? Any other ideas? What is mom experiencing? Stress? Anything else? Embarrassment. Yeah. Anything else? Judgment. Mm-hmm. And that judgment from other people in the store, right? It is real to her. In reality, it could be real or just perceived, right? Because when I see this in the store, I'm like, "I get you, Mom." And then I try to give this look like I'm in support, but I think I just look creepy. So I need a different strategy. I'm like, "I got you." You see, right? And so it's a little much. Okay, so anything else she's experiencing? Maybe shame, right? Maybe inability. Maybe like I'm supposed to got this and I don't got this, right? All of these things that we start to internalize, all right? And so like I just want to even notice in your bodies, because like sometimes when we look at this, right, our heart rate can start to go up a little bit. Maybe you feel a little warmer around the ears, right? So just like looking at that and imagining that can bring up not a triggered response, but kind of a mild elevation because of empathy, because of mirror neurons, right? And so let's talk about what we're gonna do today. All right, so we're gonna cover basically 4 things. What are triggers and why do they happen? What is your own trigger type? All right, so we're gonna look at fight, flight, which most of you know, and freeze and fawn, which some people don't know, right? We're gonna look at how we reduce our reactivity, and then we're gonna look at some tools for how we can continue to reduce our reactivity. And so to start off, in case wait, where's my thing? Hang on, just, oh, hang on, I gotta do something really quick. Thought I had, there we go. All right, so to just ground ourselves and be here, we're gonna do a really simple mindfulness activity. I just ask you to breathe with the fish. All right, how do your bodies feel right now? Any different than a minute ago? How? Calmer. Great. How about for you? Nope. Anyone else? Heart rate dropped a little bit, right? Good. Kind of a cliche, right, to say take deep breaths. Right? So, but here's why taking deep breaths is so important. When we get triggered and we go into a fight flight reaction, right? When our amygdala takes over our lizard brain, right? Our automatic body response is to breathe shallow, to bring more oxygen in, to get ready to fight a bear, right? And so that shallow breathing signals your heart rate increasing, also signals that you're ready, you're under threat, right? And so if you can shortcut and find a way to take those deep breaths, your amygdala, your lizard brain says, whoa, hold on. I thought there was an emergency, but she's deep breathing. Things may be okay in this situation, right? And so it can buy you a little time to try to grab a tool that's going to help you to stay calm when your kid is not, or when there's any other stressful situation. And one of that's great. So let me say a little bit about the Village Well, which is the organization I founded. So I have been in education for 25 years. I was a high school teacher over at Balboa High School. out in the Excelsior at the start of my career, and then I went into teacher training, nonprofits, after-school programs, philanthropy, hated philanthropy, went into some other education nonprofits, and that was kind of my career and focus. Did a little bit of family support, but most of it was around experiences for young people of color, right? And then in 2020, y'all were there, you know what happened. And we were quarantined, went to virtual schooling. My older son, who was 10 at the time, has a couple learning disabilities. And virtual schooling was never going to work out for him, right? But I was a teacher, so I was like, I got this. I can handle 35 high school kids. I can handle one 10-year-old, right? I did not got this, right? And so he started reacting out against what was an impossible situation for him. And I started bringing back the pressure. You have to dedicate yourself. You have to do it. In retrospect, I would have done it much differently. And what happened is he started getting worse and worse, and his outbursts started getting increasingly hostile, violent, scary, increase in frequency, duration, and intensity, right? And at some point, I started to realize this is not just a power struggle. This is a mental health problem, right? And what I didn't realize yet is how this was happening to kids, and especially tweens and teens all over the country, right? That this was part of the second pandemic, right, which was mental health. And so fortunately, we were able to get him. So let me go back. I don't go too much into like exactly what was happening for him because that's his story to tell. But imagine, or you may have experience, telling him, a 10-year-old, it's time to brush your teeth, and that incites a 2-hour meltdown, screaming fit, throwing things, breaking things, F you, I hate you, you're not my dad, right? Which as an adoptive father is just, and so I knew that that was the mental illness screaming at me, but I couldn't find it in myself to stay calm when my kid was not, right? Because I think that the way I was raised in my family culture, that which has so much positivity and beauty that I want to bring forward, no kid has ever talked to their parent that way and survived. And so my instinct was to do what? Right. And so we got into a cycle of the most vicious, unhealthy power struggles that I've ever been part of, right? And so he's screaming, I'm leaning in and screaming, I'm cussing him out back, you cannot talk to me, how dare you, right? And I'm trying to dominate and overpower. Meanwhile, his mental health gets worse and worse and worse. I'm not putting it all on my shoulders, right? But it was definitely a contributing factor, right? And so what I realized is that I needed help too. So we got him a ton of psychiatrists, therapists, family therapists, right? All of these people came to our house in the pandemic to support our family and saved our family. And I knew I needed more support too. And so I went out and found this whole field of positive parenting, which I loved, which was about how do you connect with your kid? How do you prioritize the relationship? How do you give voice and choice, right? And so instead of trying to dominate, how do we figure out what the kid needs and speak to that need? And as a high school teacher, a former high school teacher, this really appealed to me, right? Because it was a lot about good classroom management and how you connect with kids, right? But there were two big deficiencies with what I was seeing. One is that there were all these great tools, some of which I'm going to show you today, but you can't access these tools if you can't stay calm, right? And so I knew, and I had studied and had these things, but when he yelled at me, I yelled back. And so I realized I needed to do some serious work, some healing some going back and figuring out what my trauma was, not just from my parents, but like ancestrally, right? And how to figure out how to get the strength and support I needed to be there for my son in his hardest moment, right? So that was one. The other piece is that the positive parenting field is hella white, right? And so what I couldn't see is it was like assuming a monocultural experience, right? Essentially assuming that the audience is a white middle class mom, right? So for example, right, I was at one great workshop, actually. It was a great workshop. I was learning a lot. And the woman was saying that I need time in the morning to be calm, to get myself ready for the day. And so the rule with my kids is that they can get up anytime they want, but they can't come downstairs till 7 o'clock, right? So you're laughing. What's the problem with that?
I don't have a downstairs, upstairs.
I don't have a downstairs. Right? Like, we are blessed that we live in a 3-bedroom apartment, right? So like my husband and I and the 2 kids each have their own rooms, but that's it, right? Then there's like a living room / kitchen thing, right? Right. We're lucky we have 2 bathrooms too, right? But like, it's small, so we don't have that kind of space. And that like assumption that one, we could have that kind of space to hold those boundaries, but also that my kids could were at a certain level of sophistication, of self-control, right? To be able to know like, oh, I'm going to look at the clock. I'm going to see it's 6:45, and I know I need to be upstairs for 15 minutes before I go bug Dad. That ain't happening in my house, right? And so what I wanted to do is take some of these skills, but figure out how to talk to different types of families, right? Families of color, queer families, single parents, godparents, grandparents raising kids, right? The way that our families look, and also talk to what our cultures are. Because what I realized, every parent of color I talk to, and many white parents also, right? When we look at how we are raised and also our generational experience, we all have strong cultural wisdom that we want to bring to our families. And we also have cultural trauma that we want to stop. And it's really hard to tell the difference, right? And so that's the work that we do together in the Village Well, right? And so our principles, right, that we focus on healing, starting with parental or child raiser healing, right? That we are culturally relevant, that we look at the way that it's not just about parenting skills, but are we well as people? Are we living in healthy communities? Do we move through systems that support us to be well? Spoiler alert, we don't, right? But can we do that work to start to change workplaces, the relationships between schools, after-school programs, and families, et cetera, having resources like this to support us, right? And that our best work is done in community. So I do some one-on-one coaching, but my favorite work, and the work that I believe is most powerful, is working with people in groups like this, or small groups where we can get vulnerable and share practices and heal together. Any questions? All right, let's get to the good stuff. All right, so why is staying calm so hard? Okay, once again, what are you seeing in this picture? Make some assumptions. I have never seen that. And yesterday, when I was doing this presentation, someone said that for the first time, and now you're saying this for the second time, right? Because I see a mom freaking out here, right? Who's so crushed, but I love your optimism. Right? Right. Okay, what else might we see? Yeah, so the kid's crying and mom is crying. Oh, that's good. Right? Right, so she's trying to like contain the things that she might say to her kid that she doesn't want to say. Anything else? All right, so let's talk about why, like, this baby is not a threat, right? So let's talk about why we experience these reactions. Oh, first let's look at, so a trigger, right? One thing I need to add that I forgot to is, so a trigger is an overreaction to something that we perceive as a threat, all right? So if someone pulls out a knife and you like fight or run away, that's not an overreaction, right? That is an appropriate reaction to the situation, right? But if a 2-year-old screams at you and you want to fight or run away, that is an overreaction, right? Because you're not actually under threat. A trigger is an unhealed wound, all right? So the reason we overreact is because our kid is poking at something, right? Usually from our past that we haven't healed yet. We get triggered when we see a behavior that we had to shut down in ourselves. All right? So let me give an example. My older kid triggers me more than my younger kid. For a long time, I didn't know why. Because I'm the older brother in my family, and I had aggression towards my younger brother. And so I thought I should be relating to the older kid more. And I actually do relate to the older kid more. I understand him more, right? But when he gets aggressive with his little brother, I fly off the handle so fast, right? I find myself like in my lizard brain really quickly and saying awful things sometimes and then really regretting it later. And then I came across this concept when we see a behavior that we had to shut down in ourselves, right? And so as a child, I was punished very heavily for my aggression against my little brother. And I also was a deeply feeling, very impulsive kid who like struggled to control like my urges, right? And so, and my parents' reaction to that was to punish me for that stuff, right? And so I had to learn to shut it down, and that was really hard. And so now when I see these behaviors in him, I'm mad at myself, right? And that's what comes flying out. Any questions on that? Any thoughts? Anyone thinking of a similar example that you're willing to share? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? Does that resonate in a way that you want to share? Okay. So our kids' job is to show us where these wounds are, and they're very good at their job, right? And then we can heal. And that's the hard work, right? And what I find for a lot of parents, right, is that when you got to young adulthood, you got to a point where you knew where some of your damage was, you knew where some of your trauma was, you knew where some of your weaknesses were, right? But you also found that you had ways to cope with them and move through the world as a functioning adult, right? So I knew I have these wounds, but I'm still showing up to work and I'm doing a decent job and I have friends, right? And I'm not drinking that much to cover it up, right? And weed's legal now, right? And so everything seems fine. And so I'm just going to take these wounds and I'm going to put them in a box and I'm going to label those boxes and I'm going to put them on a mental shelf back there. I know it's there, right? But I don't have to deal with it because I'm moving through the world okay, right? And then you have this wonderful creature that's your own, a little human, and it's so exciting. And then that little human grows up a little bit and it's like, look at the box. Right? There it is. You haven't dealt with that. I'm going to help you deal with that. Right? And so that is the real work of healing. We're not going to do that healing in 15 minutes today, but I am going to show you some ways that we can start to understand what's there, right? And do some work to understand and react differently, respond differently, I should say. All right. So how does your brain and body perceive threat? Let's imagine that tomorrow, it's Sunday, we're going to go for a nice hike, right? So we go find a beautiful place. It's going to be really green because of all the rain we're having. We turn around a corner and we run into that. Okay? So what instantly happens, right, is our amygdala, which is part of the limbic system that takes over when we're under threat, right, sends out a wild alarm. We're under threat, right? And I have prepared for generations for this moment, right, to keep you alive. And our amygdala, our limbic system, has gotten a lot of flack lately because of toxic stress and the way it can hurt our bodies and this and that. But I want to give some praise to the limbic system, our fight-flight response, because this response has kept all of our ancestors alive long enough to at least reproduce so that you could be here listening to me drone on today. Right? So some praise for the limbic system. So what happens when we see that bear? First of all, with our eyes, we get tunnel vision, right? So you don't need to notice everything around you, right? If you're a gatherer in nature, you don't need to know where the mushrooms are right now. You just need to focus on the bear, right? Our lungs, as I said before, start to breathe shallow, pulling in more oxygen. Our muscles tense up because if that bear hits us, we need to be ready to kind of deflect the blow. The liver starts converting glycogen, which is stored sugar, into simple sugar in the bloodstream that will be burned, right? So we have all of this energy. We've heard like the urban legends of like a car falling on someone and the mom comes out and lifts the car up. And I can also share that my friend who is a mountain biker and a small woman, her son is bigger than her, they were mountain biking and he fell on his mountain bike and I think broke his arm, right? And she picked him up and ran half a mile down the mountain carrying him. Yeah. And pulled a muscle in her shoulder doing it, but didn't realize it until later in the day, right? That is the power that we have. Any system that is not directly related to fighting that bear or running away shuts down because your body is going to use that blood and energy and put it to our limbs, right? So we can run and fight, right? So the bladder shuts down, which is why sometimes we pee when we're scared, right? Our digestive system shuts down. We don't need it to work, right? The sugar also, that's why our hands shake, right? Heart beats fast. And then let's go to the brain. This is really important. All right. Our lizard brain takes over. And so our frontal lobe, which is our rational thinking brain, shuts down. You literally become dumber when you're in fight flight. Now, if you're going to fight a bear, it's probably a good idea to be dumber, right? To believe you have a chance to get out of this alive, right? But now let's imagine that you are a kid in school who's living with some serious PTSD from a dysfunctional violent family or a dysfunctional violent neighborhood, right? You're in that mode all the time. You can't learn, right? And so it's amazing that our kids are able to progress in school at all. But also, I feel like this is a really under-tapped experience to looking at why kids in low-income neighborhoods are always lag behind their wealthier counterparts in academics, right? And so that's part of the reason that I don't think we explore enough, right? So when you are in fight flight, remember that you're dumber. Don't send the text. Don't call your mom and tell her how you feel. Don't say the thing to your kid or your partner, right? Because it's going to come out of anger and your rational brain does not have control over your thinking right now. I have sent the text. I'm speaking from experience right now. Okay, so we're going to look at 4 responses to trauma. All right, so when something happens, how do we react? Most of you have heard of flight and fight, right? But maybe not thought about it in a like work life, family context, right? So flight, behaviors that we see with people who flight is their go-to behavior, right? So workaholism, right? We may not have associated flight behavior with workaholism before, but why is workaholism a type of flight behavior? Any ideas? Yeah.
If you're avoiding.
Right? So if you are working until 9 every night and your family's dysfunctional, you're avoiding your family, right? Or it also could be a type of fawn behavior, we'll get there, which is I'm going to be so perfect that nobody's going to bother me, right? Perfectionism, as I said, overthinking, panic, right? These are flight behaviors. Fight behaviors, you know what that looks like, right? But in a family or work context, it's controlling, it's bullying, it's angry outbursts, right? All right, the next two are a little less understood, right? And so if you think about running from the bear or fighting the bear, if you realize that you're trapped in a corner and you can't run away and you can't beat the bear up, maybe you just shut down and try to be really still so the bear doesn't eat you, right? So freezing in our modern life looks like I can't make a decision, right? I definitely experienced this behavior in 2020, in the early part of the pandemic, right? And it surprised me, right? But like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to act. I'm just feeling stuck in my terror. Dissociation, right, is this idea of kind of mentally escaping your body, right? Because things may be so bad, I don't want to be part of it, right? It's not I present it there like it's a rational process. It's not, right? It's something that happens when we may go through extreme stress. So victims of violent crime often report dissociation, but that can also happen in life, right? Where, wow, my house is so chaotic. Oh, this is a much calmer lesson. This is how my husband pisses me off most of the time, right? The kids start fighting, or I can see it's about to happen. I'm like, I'm going to go and intervene, and he's just like typing away on his laptop. I'm like, how can you ignore this, right? But he has a freeze numbing response where he can tune it out. And so I have learned to understand it and try to be more gentle about it, but we still fight about it sometimes. Fawn. All right, this is a really different one. Anybody heard of fawn before? What's fawn to you? Yes, yes. Anyone else? Yeah. Compliance, all right? So if I can't run away from the bear, fight the bear, hide from the bear, maybe I'll make the bear love me so he won't eat me, right? So it's probably not a good strategy with bears, but it might work for an abusive father. It might work for an a-hole boss, right? And so in these behaviors, you lose sense of what you need, what your identity is, what you want, your desires, and completely surrender that to the figure that you see as the leader, which also may not be the source of the difficulty and the stress, right? So I will say, several years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I was in a really bad professional environment, and it was toxic and it was unhealthy, and I recognized that, but also like, I'm used to doing well, right? Like I got A's in school. I get good performance evaluations. So it was a surprise to me. And so I went through this very strange experience, which I only now, like maybe in the last year, understand, which is, you guys are all stupid. You don't know anything. I'm smarter than all of you. I have no respect for you. And please love me. Please like me. Don't you see how good my work is? right? And I would go back and forth between those things in this flight fawn response that, guess what? It didn't make me a better worker. And also, it didn't serve me well, because what I couldn't figure out how to do is actually say, oh, this situation is not working, and so I need to either try to repair the situation or get the hell out, right? I did eventually get the hell out, all right? So, flight, fight, freeze, fawn, right? All of us are familiar with all of these behaviors, right? So we may go back and forth through these different behaviors at different stressful times. And you probably have a go-to response in a certain context, right? And so there are times with my kids when I'm stressed that I am in flight, that I'm in freeze, that I'm in fawn, but mostly my go-to response with my family is fight, right? My mom was a fighter. It's not hard to figure out the psychology of that, right? But I also told you in this professional environment where I didn't feel like I was safe to fight or couldn't find the voice to fight in that, I had a different auto response. Does that make sense? Right? So I want you to think about in either your work with your kids, either in your interactions with your kids when you're triggered, or if you're a teacher social worker with clients, students, right? Do you have a go-to response, right? So just think about that for 30 seconds, and I am going to ask you to share. So, any questions while we're contemplating? Okay. So I'm going to do a quick partnering to discuss a few questions. But before I partner, I want to do a couple of things. So I want you to partner with someone who's Spanish speaking, right? And so do we have other Spanish speakers here that you could partner with? Okay, can you guys partner together? Great. And then do we have anyone else who prefers to speak in Spanish? Okay, anyone who prefers to speak in Cantonese? Yeah? Okay, can you two partner together? See each other? Okay, great. And then any other languages that folks prefer? Okay, great. So if your primary response is flight, raise your hand, your go-to. Okay, I see. Thank you. 1, 2, anyone else? All right, can you guys make eye contact with each other so you know, because you're going to be partners. Anyone whose primary response is fight? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So can y'all make eye contact with one? Okay, 1, 2, and then you guys will partner together here. Great. Freezers. Wow. Okay. All right. So I'm going to say you guys can partner together because you're right here, and then can you come and work with you here? See each other. I see you matching shirt, bag, and shoes. And any other freezies? Oh, great. Actually, you two work together since you're right here. We'll make it convenient. And then can you two work together here? Great. And fawn? All right. Did you guys know you were fawn before you came in? Yeah, it's usually new to people. Welcome to my club. All right, so can you two partner here? Okay, and is anyone not partnered? Okay, where should I put you? Yes. Okay, so if you're all of them, all of the same time, you need a hug. All right, anyone have multiples? Okay, I'm gonna have the three of you. So 1, 2, 3 work together, and we'll give you extra time. Anyone else need a partner? Do you have a partner? Okay, great. Great. Okay, so in a second, I'm going to have you go meet up with your partner. Please introduce yourself. Oh, we'll do that later. And you're going to answer these 3 questions together. What is your go-to reaction? fight, flight, all. How does this show up for you? So when you're triggered with your kid, what do you see? So what does all of them look like for you? What does fight look like for you? Is it cussing? Is it storming? Is it yelling? Whatever, right? And then what do you need to re-regulate, right? And that's the most important question, so make sure you get there, right? So you're gonna have 5 minutes in your partners. Meet up, go. Oh, yes. So you're going to be with you. Yes. And then there was one more person. Yeah, coming in. Great. What's your name? What's your name? Jason. You're like my cheerleader.
And actually, I do have kind of an overarching question because he's obviously developmentally disabled, right? He's also nonverbal. So he recently, I really wanted to hear your talk because, he has the behaviors and autism, he can't speak. But then it's like my personal reaction to his behaviors is I have to be, of course, cognizant and sympathetic to the fact that yes, he's low functioning, he's autistic, he has behaviors, and I understand that. But at the same time, it keeps that hard for me mentally to kind of keep balance. Because I'm still working from home full time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I work for a
Wow.
bank, and
Yeah.
so I'm working from home full time. And one of the things that really triggers me, and I really try to come up with my own tools and strategies, is like I have to focus on my job and not at home. But on days where he's supposed to be in school and something comes up, so he gets seizures as well. And his nurse, it's just happened these last 2 weeks, where his nurse came down, so he was out for a week. So he had to stay home because his program is such that he requires transportation. It's an hour and a half.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So if there's no nurse, he can't go to school. So then he's immediately stuck with me at home. And he's about to be done. He's about to age out. And so I'm highly concerned.
Yeah.
This balance will not go crazy. Right? Because he's not able to. His favorite thing to do is go on YouTube and watch his own videos. But he still has demands, right? But I don't know how to segment myself between keeping more focus on my workaholic. Okay, I feel like I have to do more workaholic stuff so I can get my job done, my tasks.
Yeah.
At the same time, I have to take care of him.
Yeah.
But there's no support system. The care provider doesn't come in typically until after school. But all of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, we can't go to school because something's wrong with the driver or the nurse, okay, or he's not feeling well or something, okay, and there's no immediate backup.
Yeah.
So I there's it's related to stress, right? And my husband and I are okay. Because he's done like 100% up and down the line where he really avoids it. So you get an immediate trigger on that. About that spend a lot of time. He doesn't work on site, in his office, but I'm stuck at home. Okay. But at the same time, I have to take care of him, and I have all kinds of responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know how to get past that, but our family is because of that.
So.
So I'm hoping that I can give me some strategies.
Yeah.
Our family's having a big problem.
So I can give you strategies, and we will after this, on like your own calmness, right? But also like you actually are in an extremely difficult situation, right? And right.
But then he can't stop making demands.
Right.
And I have my work demands.
Right. And so I have some thoughts on that. This aren't going to solve your situation, but we can talk about also. Yes. So what I'm going to give you my information also, and like I'd love to do a free session with you to talk about it.
I've talked to his behaviors and
Yes. Yeah. Well, see, that's not what I'm gonna do, right? Because,
And
right?
I don't think that's what I need.
No.
Because there are all a lot of talking about this.
Right.
I need
No, we can talk about realistic boundaries. I also do a lot of couples work. I'm not a couples counselor, right? But I do work with couples around.
I'm looking for people who have an understanding of knowledge and disability.
Yeah.
Balance that.
Yes.
I have another kid too. He's in college.
Yeah.
Okay. He's about to come back. But it's just trying to keep that balance.
Yeah. One of the things that I do with couples is talk about you don't need to be in the same, but he's also not at home, right? You don't need to be on the same page, but you need to be in the same chapter. So let's talk about that because you're not in the same chapter right now.
Oh, I know.
Right? And so, yes.
I reached out.
Yeah. We'll talk. Yeah.
One died of breast cancer.
Oh my
And
God.
the dad, widow, has an autistic kid.
Oh.
So that husband with the widow,
Yeah.
he still can't. My friend, his wife, passed away.
Oh my God.
In the year after that, 2020, I have another mutual friend, also with the son on the autistic spectrum. She died of a house fire. But the son also died of a house fire because she went out to rescue him when the house was burning down. And the son was exhibiting fear responses. And
Yeah, he
so
froze.
She stayed with him, and they both perished. I know. That's what happened to that family.
Oh my God. Oh, hang on one second. 2 more minutes. I think you've taken plenty. Yeah. Thank you.
I didn't know. I actually had one that was you did your introduction. I was trying to get that thing, but the video timed out. So I was
Okay,
like,
no worries. Thank you. Take 30 more seconds. All right, and please wrap up your conversation. I know you could say more. And please high five your partner. And you can go back to your seat. All right, I hope those were amazing, productive conversations. And I'd love to hear 3 people report out. What do you need to re-regulate? Share your own experience on this one. What do you need to re-regulate when you get triggered?
When I walk by, I just tell myself, breathe, don't answer, and don't respond, don't say anything, and I pray a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I pray a lot.
Excellent.
So, I mean, it's difficult situation. Thank you for your workshop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that's what I do, and I try to also create. It's really hard to think about how do I rephrase these sayings because I say the same thing over and over and over. So how do I say it different ways?
I will help you with that.
You know, so yeah.
I'm good at that. Yeah. Okay. So I heard breathing, I heard walking, I heard don't say anything, and I heard prayer. Right? Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to disagree with you slightly. Okay. If you can figure out what the trigger is, right? If you can figure out the situation where you get triggered, that's really important. And then it's good to like do work to heal. But there are shortcuts that we can have that we'll teach, right? To get you some time while you're doing the healing work, right? Because healing takes a long time, right? All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
From my child.
Mhm.
He currently having a curriculum about emotion. You can blow the flower, blow the candle, smell the flower, blow the candles, or your breathing, and sometimes you just walk away, running, just run around your house, run around and stay in the backyard a little bit, smell some fresh air, calm yourself down. About they are training, they are perfect like you does.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Okay, great. So these are calming strategies for your kid that you're learning for yourself, right? Blow out the candle, blow the daisies, right? We have a new one in my house, which I don't necessarily recommend for you, but I'll put it out there, which is for our 6-year-old, when he's starting to get stressed, we'll say, let's have a stink breath contest. And then we run up to each other really close and go, ah, right? And then judge who has the stinkest breath. But it uses humor, which is also a great strategy, right? And the breathing, right? So that's working a lot for us. Anyone else?
Oh, I was just going to share, but I want to be mindful of
Yep,
the
yep.
time.
We have time for one more.
We didn't share it, but I was thinking, oh, it actually shifted with my own son. I can be a fighter. I was getting so like, I feel like I'm going to lose my patience. And I closed the door and he was like, he got really upset later. You slammed the door, you closed the door. And I was like, honey, I'm sorry if that hurt your feelings. That was for me. I needed that time. I needed it to calm down. And then he saw it in a different way. Like it wasn't a timeout for you. I needed a timeout. I needed a few minutes for a timeout. And it seemed like for a moment, it just registered and shifted something for him. Like I'm modeling. I have a temper. I have feelings too. And I need to be able to calm down. And sometimes I have to take that space for a minute.
I think that's so important, right? The modeling of I'm having big feelings and I'm going to validate those big feelings and take care of those big feelings in a way that's safe for all of us, right? That's huge, right? And so I would also say the slamming of the door is always going to create a lack of safety, right? And so what's a different thing you can do, like punching the pillow or screaming into the pillow, right? Or power walking around the house, right? Or whatever that thing is, right? I've slammed some doors too. That's not a judgment. All right. So what I want to go into right now is 4 proven ways to do what we call close the stress cycle, right? So when we get triggered, all of these hormones are in our bodies preparing us to fight the bear, right? And the problem with modern life is that we don't actually fight the bear, right? And so the hormones just stay in us and we don't close the stress cycle, right? And when we don't, all of those reactions that we learned about earlier that keep us alive in a real threat turn against us, right? So I said so your heart rate increases when you're under threat, right? If you have toxic stress, that heart rate stays fast, and then you can get irregular heartbeat. That can lead to cardiac arrest, right? Panic attacks, right? I talked about all the systems that are not used in fighting shutting down, right? So if you're under toxic stress, what happens to your digestive system?
It shuts down.
Shuts down, and when it shuts down for a long time, what are some of the issues we get? Related to stress, stomach, ulcers, IBS, which I experienced in 2020 in my stress, right? Irritable bowel syndrome is IBS, right? Insomnia, right? Because you can't calm down. How many of us have ever had tense muscles in our shoulders and back, right? Right? That's because that muscle tensing and then it stays there, right? And so these are ways that we want to do to close the stress cycle. So I heard movement earlier. That's amazing, right? And so movement, right? All of these hormones and reactions are preparing us to fight a bear, run away from a bear, big movement, right? So move in order to close the stress cycle. Now, here's the thing with movement. You're all adults. You know you're supposed to exercise. You do or you don't. That's on you, right? And a 10-minute walk twice a day, right? That's what you need for mental health, right? If you want to, be cardiovascularly amazing and compete in the Olympics, you need a different level of exercise. But if you go for a walk 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, walk briskly, right? That's what you need in order to close the stress cycle. All right, mindfulness. So we did a mindful practice earlier, right? So some of us have, how many of you have a mindfulness or meditation practice, right? Prayer is the same. How many of us have a prayer practice? Good, right? Catholics have the rosary, right? Same thing, right? Repetition over and over, right? So all of that is a mindful practice, right? How many of you just can't? It's okay. Yes. All right. So I call this mindfulness for the fidgety. All right. Go outside, do your walk, but walk a little slowly. I'm going to notice everything red, almost red. Coffee can, Australia, Post-its-ish, water bottle, right? What that does, outside it'll be flowers and stuff, so it's even better. It forces you into the present, right? And here's the thing, most stress is being annoyed about the past, or fearful, or angry, or worried about the future. So if you can stay right here, you're probably okay. And if you're not right here, then run from the bear. All right? But usually you find if you can stay centered right now, you're going to be okay. Human connection, right? Even for introverts, right? Human connection. I mean, we all experienced this in the beginning of the pandemic, right? We freaked out because we couldn't see the people that we need to see, right? And so call that best friend, right? You know the people who fill you with energy, right? Rather than suck your energy, right? So start to get away from those energy suckers, right? And start to connect more with these people that fill your cup, right? And do it regularly. Flow. Anybody know what flow is? It's my favorite one. Okay. So flow, you can think of it as joy, right? But it's a specific type of joy where you're engaged in an activity that you love, right? And you lose track of time and you kind of become one with the activity. And it's like, it's a little bit challenging, but not quite. It's just this awesome, different space. And it's so healing. Anybody knit, craft? Yeah. So you know, right? Painters, artists, right? Legos. Absolutely. One of the things I realized with my older son, he loves Legos. And when I interrupt him, right, I'm interrupting his flow, right? And so I try to be more generous. Like if he skips half of dinner because he's doing Legos, now I'm okay with that. Or I try to give him long warnings, right? And then when it's time to get to finish, I get down on his level, like, okay, show me what you've done. Oh, that's so cool. What's a good logical place to stop that you can get to in the next 5 minutes? Can I help you? Right? That's when I'm at my best. Sometimes I'm like, dinner's ready, get over, right? But when I'm at my best, I'm like working with him to close his flow so that then we can move on to the next piece, right? So what's your name? Camilo, what's something that gives you flow? Being empathetic. Okay. So talking with a friend, right, also creates flow. Being in nature creates flow. So hiking with someone you love in nature, triple threat, right? You get the human connection, you get the movement, you get the flow, right? So definitely something that I love to do. For me, I'm a bird nerd. I love raptor birds, hawks, falcons, eagles. And so in the fall, there's an amazing migration that happens across the bay. And so I'm out there with my binoculars and like my friends think I'm weird and I can deal with that, right? But like I'm out in nature, I'm looking up, I'm enjoying, I'm learning, right? So all of that is flow. All right, I have 2 more tools and then we have a little time for questions. So a mantra. Similar to a prayer, but short, right? A mantra is a short phrase to remind you that you are safe. Best used right before the difficult situation, right? But can be used during. So let me give you an example. I pick up my oldest every weekday at 5:15. I pull up to his after-school program. I tell the guy to call my son to come down. Turn off radio, everything in the car.